I was 16, almost 17, living with my mom and my younger brother, Ryan. He was about 7 at the time. My mom worked night shifts at a nursing home, so usually I stayed home with Ryan while she was gone. Since he was little, he was already asleep by 8 p.m. I did my own thing, watched TV, read messages on my phone, ate junk food. Normal teenage stuff. We lived in a small, single-story house on the edge of a forest. It wasn't completely isolated, but there weren't many neighbors nearby either. I actually liked being home alone at night. Until all of this happened. The first time I noticed something strange, it was very small. I was lying in bed around 11 p.m., scrolling on my phone, when I heard a weird sound, like someone dragging their feet across the carpet. I froze. Ryan was asleep. Mom wasn't home. I sat there, holding my breath, listening. For a few seconds there was silence. Then the sound came again, a faint scrape, like someone slowly moving through the living room. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and stepped out of my room. I checked the front door, locked. The back door, locked. Everything seemed fine. But then I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The hallway closet door was slightly open. Just a crack. We never left that door open. Never. I stood there, every muscle in my body tense. I wanted to turn around and go back to my room, but like an idiot, I decided to check. I yanked the door open. Nothing. Just coats and shoes. I even laughed, telling myself I was overreacting. Still, I locked the closet before going back to bed. A few nights later, I woke up for no reason. At first, I didn't understand why. Then I realized, I could hear breathing. I lay completely still, terrified. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't outside. It was inside my room. My hands shaking, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the room. Nothing. Everything looked normal. The closet door was closed. I barely slept the rest of that night. After that, I started feeling strange, like someone was watching me. Every time I turned my back, I felt like something was standing just around the corner. I told my mom, but she brushed it off. A week later, she woke me up after coming home early from work. She looked upset. She asked why the back door wasn't locked. I told her confidently that I had locked it. She said it was open when she got home and that she had closed it herself. I clearly remembered locking it, but I didn't argue. That night, I was on edge. I locked my bedroom door and kept my phone in my hand. I woke up to breathing again, and that awful feeling of being watched. My body went ice cold. I sat up in bed, barely breathing, listening. Then I noticed the closet door was open again. I turned on the flashlight, and just in time, I saw the door open another inch. And then I saw him. I swear to God, there was a man sitting inside my closet. His skin was white as chalk. His hair was greasy and matted. He was painfully thin, like he hadn't eaten in weeks. And he was smiling at me. I don't remember how I moved. One moment I was staring at him, the next, I slammed my door shut and ran to Ryan's room. He woke up crying as I grabbed him and ran out of the house. My phone was already dialing 911. The police arrived quickly. They found him in my closet. It turned out he had been living in our basement for weeks. He got into the house through a ventilation opening and came upstairs every night. He watched us sleep. He took food when we weren't looking. But the worst part? Behind my coats, they found a knife. The police said he was probably waiting for the right moment. I try not to think about what could have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. After 2 years of stagnation, I decided I needed to change my life. Despite my parents' objections, I moved out. I also decided to continue my education, but to do that without help, I had to take 2 jobs. That's how I ended up living in a basement apartment with my neighbor Patrick. The whole house belonged to his parents. It had 2 floors plus the basement. An elderly couple lived on the 2nd floor. On the 1st floor lived a woman I had only seen twice. Most of the time, the 1st floor was empty. Honestly, living there was awful. Even without the constant arguing from the old couple upstairs, our ceiling constantly leaked, and the windows were positioned so people could walk right up from the street. People would watch what we were doing. Drunk people would write insults on our windows. Kids tried to steal things from the windowsills or break in. Summer was a nightmare. But after 2 or 3 months, I was so exhausted that I stopped caring. If someone wanted to watch me change clothes in my room, whatever. Another colony of spiders in the bathroom? Guess my arachnophobia was cured. Time for a bath. Patrick took my things without asking. Whatever. 2 years later. August 2014. I hadn't slept much, but I finally had a week off. No school, no work, no responsibilities. Just rest. I stayed in bed all day, sleeping. Around 4 p.m., I started hearing strange noises, rustling, doors slamming, fast footsteps. Before I fully woke up, my bedroom door opened. Someone grabbed me and started shaking me, saying, "Get up." I opened my eyes. My first and only thought, Patrick. But the man looked nothing like him. Patrick had long black hair, was very thin, and always wore a green hoodie. This man was much taller, muscular, and bald. And yet, my brain saw all those differences and still thought, Patrick. I remember saying something like, "Can't you see I'm trying to rest?" and rolling onto my left side. But Patrick didn't leave. He grabbed me again, repeating, "Get up." I said, "No way," and added, "I don't care what you did this time, leave." I probably didn't say it very clearly. And then, Patrick left. I heard him running around the house, making noise. Then I fell back asleep. 2 hours later, I was woken up by the real Patrick. He was panicking, asking if I was okay. That's when we realized the place had been trashed. Patrick's room was destroyed. We lost our laptops, my phone, some food from the fridge, and for some reason, my notebooks and a cheap little Bulbasaur figurine I kept on my nightstand. The police arrived quickly. Thanks to a neighbor's camera, we had footage of a tall, bald man entering the property sometime after 3 p.m., wandering around for a while, then heading to the back of the house. The police weren't thrilled with my version of events. They looked at me like they couldn't understand how I'd survived living in that place for years. Patrick's parents were even more upset. They spent days complaining about me and criticizing how I should have fought back and protected the house. My parents tried to convince me to come home again. After 3 more weeks, things only got worse. So I packed my things and left. After that, I had several conversations with the police, but as far as I know, the burglar was never caught. I was in my early 20s. I went out a lot on weekends and played as a DJ quite often. Some of my friends introduced me to a few people, 2 women and 2 men. I talked to them for a bit, and they seemed perfectly normal. A few weeks later, I ran into them again at one of my gigs. One of the women, let's call her Donna, suddenly started showing interest in me. Donna was odd. She had protruding teeth and a pretty unpleasant smell. After I finished my set, I saw a woman I had known for a long time and went to dance with her. I liked her, and it seemed like she liked me too. But then she kept disappearing, running around, talking to friends, and so on. After a while, I figured she'd left and hoped we'd run into each other later. But Donna was always nearby. I wasn't interested in her at all, but I tried to keep my distance. After that night, I started noticing that Donna kept showing up wherever I was, my gigs, weekend hangouts, events with friends. She was always there. A month passed, and I saw her at a local supermarket. That's when I thought, okay, this is getting creepy. I politely said hello and quickly walked away. The following week, she kept appearing in the most unexpected places, and I became increasingly uncomfortable. One day I was walking to the beach, passing by a house, when I saw someone I initially thought was Donna, and of course, it was her. She had a strange grin on her face, her teeth sticking out, as she was taking out the trash. I knew she lived in a pretty rough part of town. But now she was suddenly in my neighborhood, a much nicer area. I later found out from a friend that she had moved there to be closer to me. As he put it, it was disturbing. I began to feel like I was being watched. Something was wrong. Then I noticed that the woman I liked had suddenly become very quiet. Before, she'd always been active and talkative. I checked her Facebook page and saw that she had removed me. I wondered what I had done wrong and felt strange, because I really did like her. Weeks passed. I kept DJing and going out with friends, and Donna started appearing again. One day, she approached me and declared that she loved me, had moved closer to be with me, and wanted to have my children. She said she had been watching me from afar and knew that I felt the same way. At that point, I was so scared that I snapped. I yelled at her to leave me alone and told her that if she continued, I'd call the police. She ran off in tears. I never saw her again. That night, several people told me that she had been spreading horrible lies about me, trying to isolate me so she could have me to herself. That explained why the woman I liked had grown distant and removed me from Facebook. She stopped hanging out with our group entirely and became very withdrawn. Only years later did she add me back. She admitted that, after everything, she realized I wasn't the person Donna had described. According to Donna, I was a sexual predator and a narcissist who abused women. I was shocked when I heard that. Only 10 years later did she learn the truth. She told me she had always loved me, and it turned out I had always loved her too. Now she's in a relationship, and so am I. This was in 2023. We just talked, caught up, and agreed that it was good we found each other again, despite everything. About 2 weeks ago, I booked an apartment in another country to attend a concert. The room was cheap, so I knew it wouldn't be a 5-star hotel, but it was just for one night, so I didn't care. All I needed was a bed. From the very beginning, the trip went badly. My roaming didn't work in that country at all. I connected to Wi-Fi in a cafe and tried to plan my route in advance. I managed to get to the place on time, rang the only doorbell, and waited. No one came out. I rang again and waited 5 minutes. I looked through the mail slot in the door and was shocked to see a hallway that looked more like an abandoned shed, an extremely dusty couch right by the door, furniture covered in cloth, everything filthy and old. Normally, I like old houses, but this looked like it hadn't been used or prepared for guests at all. I started thinking, maybe I'm in the wrong place. What should I do? Then an old man with a sickly appearance came out from around the corner. I asked him if he knew where the apartments were. He muttered something that I took as a yes. I asked if he was Tim, the owner. He said yes and opened the door for me. Inside, the main feature was an old, creaking staircase leading to the second floor. I followed him. He was breathing heavily, coughing, and smelled strongly of tobacco, which was unpleasant, but whatever. The second floor looked just as abandoned, dark, furniture in disarray, covered with cloths. In front of me hung a very strange curtain, and I couldn't see what was behind it. We went up another level and ended up in my corridor. It looked horrible, cracks in the walls, old rural paintings, and crosses hanging next to them. It looked like a horror movie set. Normally, that kind of atmosphere doesn't scare me. I actually like dark aesthetics, but this place was so neglected that I felt genuine dread. He showed me the bathroom. There was a huge hole in the tiles around the bathtub and the wall. Everything was dirty. Then he showed me my room. It was okay, but there were creepy dolls on the shelves, which made me uneasy. The bed was fine. I asked if there was Wi-Fi. He said no, which was frustrating, because I had hoped to stay connected to the outside world. I also asked what time I needed to check out the next morning. To which he replied, "It doesn't matter." Okay. Then he slowly climbed up to the fourth floor. By the way, it was completely dark up there, which gave me even more unsettling feelings. I definitely had no intention of using the shower, so I quickly changed clothes and started charging my phone. When I went to the bathroom, I realized something truly terrifying that I hadn't noticed before. There were no locks on the doors at all. Not on the bathroom. Not on the toilet. Not on my room. That genuinely scared me. I also noticed used items everywhere, apparently left behind by previous guests: shower gels, toothbrushes, toothpaste. There were random hair straighteners lying around on a shelf, like someone had just left them and never come back. I immediately decided I wasn't staying there for the night. My head filled with horrible scenarios. What if all those items belonged to people who stayed here before me? And why were there no terrible reviews? Because they were killed? I was terrified. I seriously considered taking all my belongings with me to the concert, because the place felt completely unsafe. But my back was already aching from my heavy backpack, so I only took the essentials and left the room as quickly as possible. I placed a folded piece of paper under the door to see if anyone would try to open it while I was gone. As I was going down the stairs, I heard someone turning a key in the front door. I hesitated for a moment, but the listing said a couple lived there, so I expected to see the owner's wife or girlfriend. Instead, a middle-aged man walked in and said, "Hi, I'm Tim." The only thought in my head was, then who the hell was that old man inside? I was very confused, but we exchanged a few words, and I finally left the house. I was in shock. Luckily, I made it to the concert, and it was worth it. Later, exhausted, I realized I couldn't stay there overnight, so I checked into a hostel. It wasn't super clean, but at least it had Wi-Fi, a proper shower, and doors with locks. The next morning, I was kicked out at 10 a.m., and I went back to get the rest of my things. I don't know why, but I checked the mail slot again, and almost jumped back. The old man was just snoring on the couch, right behind the front door. I tried not to wake him and quietly snuck up to my room to grab my stuff. Thankfully, the door was still open. I finally left that cursed place. I don't know if I overreacted, but honestly, anyone with common sense would have panicked too. I usually love traveling alone. But this was too much. During my third year of university, I went to a party hosted by the creative writing department, across campus. I was pretty drunk, and the atmosphere was boring, so I grabbed a snack and left. As I was walking back to my room, I realized I was completely out of it, probably more intoxicated than I had ever been in my life. It was very dark outside, around 8 p.m. Even though it was still relatively early, the campus was nearly empty, probably because the heat was unbearable and no one wanted to be outside. I was walking past a dorm where I didn't live when a man emerged from the darkness and said, "Has anyone ever told you that you look like Jesus, man?" I was extremely confused. I had never seen this person before. I tried to figure out whether I knew him, and being drunk made the whole situation even more surreal. "No. I don't think so." "Sorry, do I know you?" I asked. He replied, "Oh, right, maybe you don't know me. I've got a friend who lives here. Can you help me get into this building, man?" Every alarm bell in my head went off. He looked about 40. There were very few students over 30 at my university. His strange phrasing immediately made it clear he was hiding something. I just stood there, staring at him with my mouth open, probably for too long. He must have realized I was panicking. He was wearing a hoodie, which was suspicious given the heat. Then he slipped his hand under his jacket. Time seemed to slow down. I thought I was about to be robbed, or worse. Then he opened his jacket and said, "Look. No knife. No gun. I'm a good guy. You don't need to worry." That only made me worry more. There were so many less suspicious ways to explain why he needed access to a building I couldn't even open anyway. The keys only worked for the dorms you lived in. Maybe I didn't make the smartest decision. I'm not particularly fast or athletic. But I ran. I sprinted as hard as I could. I was so scared I didn't even dare look back or check if he was following me until I reached my building. It didn't seem like he had followed me. I worked for the school newspaper, and as part of my job, I regularly checked in with campus police to see if there was anything interesting to write about. A few days after my encounter with that strange man, an officer I often spoke with told me they had arrested a man who was trying to break into a dormitory. The same dorm I had met him in front of. I asked if the description matched, and it did. Apparently, his girlfriend, who was about 15 years younger than him, had texted him saying she was breaking up with him. He had tried to get inside to talk to her. They caught him trying to open a first-floor window about 20 minutes after I ran away. That happened about a year and a half ago. I still feel anxious thinking about it. In the summer of 2023, during the year of my first real success with an online business, which allowed me to start traveling around Europe while working and saving money for my dream of buying land, everything began incredibly well. 2023 started off amazingly. I lived for several months in Malta, then in Budapest, visiting friends who were studying abroad. I'm originally from Germany. I'm 32 now, turning 33 this year. Those first destinations were a perfect contrast to the dull, cold winters that last for months in Germany. After an amazing time in Malta and Budapest, summer began. My last destination that summer was a visit to a friend, let's call him Ben. He's a year younger than me and was studying in Varna, on the far eastern coast of Bulgaria. It's an interesting place, Soviet-style architecture mixed with a beach town vibe. The people are very friendly, and there are some beautiful spots. There are lots of expats there, and I spent my days enjoying large parks near the beach, various cafes, and clubs. I met many people and often went clubbing on weekends. The summer was warm and pleasant, and I was enjoying life, until one night, an incident happened. I was out again with Ben and his university friends. We walked around all night, drinking, dancing for hours, just enjoying a wonderful summer evening. Since we'd also been at daytime events before the party, I started feeling tired and decided to head home. It's important to describe the city's layout because it's unique. Along the entire coastline of Varna stretches a beach, and behind it, for kilometers, there are large parks leading into the city. My apartment was slightly northwest of the clubs, about a 10 to 15-minute walk. I'd taken this route many times before. People had warned me about possible attacks and robberies and always advised me to walk at least part of the way with someone. Usually, I ignored that advice. I'd just walk with music on, staying alert. That night, a few people who were also tired left with me. They lived a bit farther west, so after about 5 minutes I would say goodbye and continue alone. Still listening to music, around 4 a.m., I reached a park I often crossed, separate from the main beach parks, closer to where I lived. Because it was a summer night and the weekend, there were still a few people walking or riding through the park. When I entered the park, it didn't surprise me to see someone sitting on a bench about 50 meters to my right. He was sitting there, looking at his phone. I remember that moment very clearly. Behind him were bushes and trees. Because the park lighting was dim, I noticed another person sneaking through the bushes. Everything happened incredibly fast. I saw someone burst out of the bushes with their arms raised, holding a large rock, and run toward the person sitting on the bench, just as the seated person turned his head, not immediately realizing the danger. Then he understood. The guy on the bench screamed and ran across the park, jumping over another row of bushes and disappearing around a street corner. I took my headphones off and stood there, watching, not fully understanding what was happening. It all happened so fast. Then the person who had just tried to attack someone with a rock turned toward me. I felt a chill run down my spine as adrenaline flooded my body. He raised the rock again and, with a manic smile, ran straight at me. I turned and ran as fast as I could. He chased me for about 2 minutes. I could still see him behind me even after I crossed the street. I ran around a block and felt overwhelming relief when I saw that a fast food restaurant was still open. I burst through the door. The people inside were shocked. I couldn't speak properly, but I didn't need to say much, because the psychopath followed me and started smashing the window with the large rock. When the glass shattered, he finally ran away. What made the situation even more horrifying was what I learned later. Apparently, in the same city, in the same park, a year earlier, someone had been beaten to death with stones, killed by multiple blows to the head. After a few minutes, I put my headphones back on and walked home, avoiding that park. Back in my apartment, I was shaking, locking all the doors. I had trouble sleeping, and the next morning I realized I had cracked a tooth from grinding it in my sleep. That night happened in December, a week before Christmas. I was 32, and I was using my GI Bill to study at a college in a city in the Mountain Time Zone. I was so busy with school and work that I barely had time to go out or socialize, so I often used dating apps. I matched with a very attractive woman around my age. We had great conversations and agreed to meet. We chose a bar restaurant that was convenient for both of us to get to. Meeting her was easy, she was very beautiful in real life, and we got along great. During our conversation, I learned she worked for the police, not as an officer, but as a receptionist. I also learned she had a roommate who, according to her, had gone away for the holidays. She added that she didn't like being alone because she had a crazy ex-boyfriend who used to stalk her. That made me uneasy, and I told her so, but she assured me he was harmless, so I let it go. We had a few drinks and stayed about an hour longer. Then, at her suggestion, we went to her place. I didn't argue, she was very attractive. But then she insisted we take her car. I said I was fine, but she said I had been drinking and that she'd seen too many drunk driving accidents at her job. I understood her point, though I'd only had 2 gin and tonics and felt fine. She insisted again. That felt strange, but I didn't think much of it. When we arrived at her place, she simply opened the door. She didn't turn a key, the door was already unlocked. That struck me as very odd, considering she had said she had a stalker and her roommate wasn't home. She started feeding her cat. I noticed a bowl of porridge on the kitchen table. I touched it. It was cold, like it had been sitting there for a while. The porridge wasn't soggy. I asked whose bowl it was. She paused slightly and said she had eaten before the bar. That didn't make sense. Before I could say anything, she kissed me and led me toward the bedroom, whispering seductively. She was very attractive, and I stopped thinking about the porridge. We started kissing. When I reached for the curtains, she told me to leave them open. A few minutes later, maybe 5, we were in bed, with my back facing the window. Suddenly, she sharply inhaled and gasped. Her eyes were fixed on the window. I turned and saw a person in a hoodie, who immediately ran away. I heard footsteps fading into the backyard. I jumped up instantly, ran around, and checked whether all the doors were locked. Of course, the front door was open. I ran to it and locked it. The moment I did, someone started pounding loudly on the door. I wanted to open it to confront the guy, or at least try, but she told me to go back to bed. I yelled at her, asking if she was insane. She replied that he does this sometimes and would leave soon. I asked her if she knew it was her ex. She said yes and told me not to worry. At that moment, he started banging on another side of the house. She didn't look scared at all, still insisting that I come back to bed. I didn't want to call the police because I didn't know, maybe that guy was a cop, or maybe she knew whoever would respond and they'd take her side. I couldn't just leave because my car was still at the bar. I was panicking. I started accusing her of leaving the door unlocked. I outright called her a liar. I shouldn't have done that, but I was on edge and said, "If this is a robbery or some kind of setup, I swear I'll kill both of you." I'm not brave, but fear made me want to show that whatever happened, there would be a fight. I ordered an Uber without telling her. I kept arguing, asking questions, hoping to keep her in the room. I stood right by the door so I could leave as fast as possible. Thankfully, I hadn't taken my pants off, and my jacket and shoes were right by the door, so I managed to get dressed quickly. The taxi arrived, and without saying a word I opened the door and jumped out. I looked back, she was just standing in the doorway. It's been a little over a month now, and I still don't understand what kind of situation I ended up in. I don't believe the story about just a girl with a crazy ex. Based on the facts I've told you, it felt more like some kind of robbery attempt or a very strange fetish-driven setup involving infidelity. I honestly don't know. This happened to me in 2022, when I was about 24 years old. At the time, I was renting a room in my boyfriend's mother's house in a town more than an hour from Paris, but only about 20 minutes from Versailles, another important city in France. It was winter, possibly during the holiday season. I had gone to Paris to meet an online friend for the first time, someone I later realized was a very toxic and problematic person whom I no longer speak to. But this story isn't about her. It's important to mention that I've struggled with an eating disorder since childhood and have always looked much younger than my age. Even now, I often have to show my ID to buy alcohol. That day, I was wearing a simple outfit with a skirt. The meeting went well, but because I lived far away and planned to go back to my boyfriend later, I needed to leave before midnight. Public transportation becomes infrequent after 10 p.m., and I still had about a 2-hour journey ahead of me. Unfortunately, I didn't leave early enough. I managed to catch a train to Versailles, but then had to wait nearly an hour for a bus that would take me to the town closest to my boyfriend's home, where he was supposed to pick me up by car. While waiting at the station, I noticed a group of bus drivers smoking and talking together. I approached them to ask which one would be driving to the town near my boyfriend's house. One of them, with gray hair, probably in his 60s, said it would be him. He noticed my skirt and commented that I must be cold, then offered to let me sit in the bus to warm up until it was time to leave. I gladly agreed, since I really was freezing. As he led me toward the bus, which was parked in a very dark, unlit corner, he moved closer to me and started acting overly familiar, asking where I lived, where I was going, and similar questions. I felt uncomfortable and anxious, but I was raised to be polite and tend to people please, so I answered with minimal details. When we reached the bus, he opened the door for me. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me not to get on that bus, but I ignored them and stepped inside. I sat in the front seat, where there was a bit of light. Aside from the other drivers who had seen me walk away with him, no one else knew I was inside that bus. As soon as I entered, everything felt even scarier. He threw away his lit cigarette and got on the bus too, continuing to tell me stories about himself, how the bus had been built to transport a French football team, how there was a huge table and even a toilet in the back of the bus, and how I should go take a look. Twice he suggested that I go to the back of the bus, where it was completely dark. That terrified me even more. I quickly texted my boyfriend. I might not make it home tonight. Strange bus driver. Call me urgently. Ignoring the driver's chatter, I stayed focused on my phone. He returned to the front of the bus and stood in the aisle, blocking my way, talking about random things I don't even remember now. The entire time, his gaze was fixed on me, especially on my phone and on my knees and thighs. I prayed that my boyfriend would see my message and call me. When he finally did, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The driver must have seen my boyfriend's face on the screen, because he stepped back and said he was going outside to smoke. I answered the call and told my boyfriend everything that was happening, constantly watching the driver through the window. When he walked far enough away, I tried to get off the bus, and discovered, to my horror, that the door was locked. I was trapped inside that bus. No one knew where I was except my boyfriend, that strange driver, and the other bus drivers who had seen me leave with him. Still on the phone with my boyfriend, I returned to my seat. Through the window, I saw the driver walking back toward me. When he noticed I was on the phone, he walked away again, then came back and locked the bus. He repeated this maneuver 3 times, locking the bus each time. The last time, he stayed close to the bus. So I decided to end the call and text my boyfriend instead, keeping my phone discreet while watching the driver through the window. That's when I saw and heard an elderly woman ask him whether his bus was going to the town near my boyfriend's home. He deliberately lied to her, saying that another bus would go there. At that point, I started panicking. I texted my boyfriend that I was going to die, that the driver was going to do something terrible to me, then kill me and dump my body. And then, at that exact moment, the bus driver got back onto the bus and locked the door. We were supposed to leave in less than 10 minutes. Something in my mind snapped. I stood up, trying to appear calm, and lied, telling him I needed to go back to the station to use the restroom. He said there was a toilet on the bus. I lied again, saying I needed snacks from the vending machine. He hesitated, but eventually agreed to let me out. Before doing so, he pretended twice that the button to open the door wasn't working. At that point, I stopped hiding my fear. I told him that if he couldn't open the door, I would use the emergency hammer to break it. Suddenly, the button worked. I jumped out of the bus and took the deepest breath of cold winter air I ever had. I've never been to prison, but I imagine that's what freedom after confinement feels like. I ran back to the station and hid behind. I hid behind a vending machine, and when I finally felt safe, I broke down crying. I called my boyfriend back, and he told me to call his sister so that her boyfriend could come pick me up. While I was trying to calm down, guess who showed up at the station? That strange bus driver. He was acting like he was looking for someone, or rather, looking for me. I held my breath and waited until he left, then started crying again, realizing that I had been his target and that my suspicions about his bad intentions had been right. Eventually, my boyfriend's sister's boyfriend arrived and took me home. I couldn't sleep that night, and for several nights after that my insomnia only got worse. I reported the incident to the bus company, but since he wasn't a permanent driver, nothing was done. I didn't even receive a reply. I'm 30 years old now. I went to the gym around 5:30 a.m. The building is open 24 hours a day, so there's always a security guard sitting at a desk in the center of a large, fairly empty lobby. Behind the security desk is a row of elevators. The gym is on the top floor. What's on the other floors, I'm not exactly sure, probably offices and things like that. I came in from outside, it was still dark, ready for my workout. I was very sleepy and noticed that the security guard was someone I had never seen before. He smiled at me as I approached, and immediately I felt something was off. Nothing specific happened, but I felt a chill run through me and thought, I don't like this guy. Before I could even process it, he stood up, came out from behind the desk, and went to stand next to the elevators, waiting. That struck me as strange. Wasn't he supposed to stay at his post? Why was he even going to another floor? But who was I to judge? Maybe he had duties as a security guard. Still, I didn't want to be alone with him in the elevator. Something inside me told me to stay where I was. When the elevator arrived, he gestured for me to go first, like, after you. I pretended to be on the phone and smiled, as if saying, oh, looks like I can't go right now. That's when things became truly disturbing, and I really want to hear other people's opinions. I stayed there for another 7 minutes. I know it was exactly that long because I listened to 2 songs on my headphones. Then I pressed the elevator button, and it lit up immediately, as if the elevator was already on the floor. And it was. The doors opened, and he was standing inside. He had never left the floor. He had just been standing in the elevator the entire time. Waiting for me. And the creepiest part, he was smiling at me, as if to say, aren't you coming in? I took several steps back. He noticed how scared I was. Panicking, I pretended to talk on the phone again, then decided to take the stairs and walk up all the floors. While I was working out, I started to calm down a bit, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The more I replayed it in my head, the stranger it felt. There are two important things to know to understand the next part of this story. First, I've suffered from severe insomnia since childhood and often wouldn't fall asleep until morning. Second, the second floor of my childhood home was one large open space. My bed was in a corner divided by bookshelves and a wardrobe, but they didn't reach the ceiling, and there was no door. So I could hear and see everything that happened upstairs. There was a door on that floor that led outside, toward a hill, across a poorly built bridge made of 3 long, unstable wooden planks. There were bells tied to the door, because when I did sleep, I often sleepwalked. This happened when I was about 11 years old. We lived in a fairly remote area. One night, when my parents were already asleep and it was early morning, I heard loud, aggressive shaking at the door, extremely loud shaking, with the bells ringing violently. I don't understand how my parents didn't wake up. From the sound, it was definitely a person, not an animal. I don't think they were trying to break the lock. It sounded like someone was gripping the door handle and shaking it violently, trying to force it open. Reminder, they were standing on flat wooden planks, with concrete underneath. Breaking the door wouldn't have been easy. They shook the door for several minutes, then stopped, then started again. This repeated several times. Just when I thought they had left, the shaking would start again. The upstairs door was always locked because it was unsafe, but the front door on the first floor was always unlocked. We lived far from neighbors, and the road was almost impassable. We never thought we needed to lock it. Ironically, all they had to do was try the front door. A few weeks later, the same thing happened again, shaking the handle, a pause, then shaking again. But they still never tried the front door. After that, it never happened again, at least not that I know of. I went to sleep every night expecting them to come back. And honestly, given the situation, that was the best possible outcome. Now I live 9 hours away from that house, and life has gone on. But it's strange that I never found out who it was. Maybe I've already met that person and didn't even realize it. As for the scariest moments of my life, this is number 1. It was a paralyzing fear. You can't move. You can't scream. I couldn't wake my parents. I couldn't do anything. If they had come inside, I probably wouldn't have even run. To this day, I have nightmares where something terrible is happening and I can't scream. My parents still think I made it up. But after I talked to my brother, I learned that he also woke up that night and heard the same sounds. His bed was closer to the door, so he heard it even more clearly. There were many disappearances and murders in our area around that time. In the year this happened, there was actually a murder on our street. Maybe the person who was arrested back then was my mysterious visitor. Who knows? I now live in Madrid, Spain, specifically in a ground-floor apartment that opens directly onto the street, right across from a mosque. Every Friday at noon, the street fills with people going to pray, so noise at that time is normal. As I mentioned, my apartment faces the street. If someone is standing near my door, I can hear their conversations and sounds clearly. A few days ago, I was sitting at my computer playing games and had been hearing someone talking right outside my door for quite a while. It was a drunk man, laughing nervously and rambling incoherently. I listened to this for almost an hour before I went out to tell him he was disturbing me and needed to leave. When I opened the door, I saw a man around 56 years old, most likely Moroccan or Algerian, in a terrible state. With him were 2 children, a boy and a girl, about 10 years old, who had just come out of school. They were wearing school uniforms and backpacks and were sitting right by my door, clearly uncomfortable and scared. The man was reaching toward the girl, ignoring the boy, not touching her face, but saying things like, "You're so beautiful. Come with me. God gave you such a beautiful face." I want to emphasize that the entrance to the mosque was crowded with people. My street is quite busy at 2 to 3 p.m. Not a single person standing there did anything or showed that this behavior was unacceptable. When I saw this, my first instinct was to smash that piece of trash's head in, but I didn't want to traumatize the children. I approached them and told them that their mother was waiting at the corner and that I would walk them there. I also told the man to disappear. The kids immediately thanked me, and I walked them safely away. When I got back home, I was so angry that I started looking for the man in the area, not just to report him to the police, though part of me wanted to, but to detain him and then call the police. But that bastard was already gone. I went to the mosque entrance and argued with several people there, who seemed unable to understand how horrific the situation had been. This happened more than 10 years ago, but I still think about how close I was to dying. At the time, I was already dating my future husband when I met his cousin. We had a lot in common. We were both struggling with addiction and anorexia. We talked on the phone, met up to eat, went to the movies. But one day, he kissed me in the car, and I realized it would be better if we stopped seeing each other. I told my future husband about it, and he was understanding. What I didn't tell him was how upset his cousin became after I rejected him. Some time passed, and we started seeing each other again, just as friends. Since we were both dealing with starvation, we always went to the same place to eat. But after a few meetings, I realized that continuing this relationship wasn't healthy for either of us. He asked to meet one last time, and foolishly, I agreed. We went to our usual place, and during dinner he talked about his apartment, his job, and how happy he could make me. I felt uncomfortable and asked him to drive me home. It was already late, but instead of taking me home, he drove into a wooded park area. It was completely dark, all the streetlights were off. I immediately felt anxious. We were alone in the park, and I had a terrible feeling that something bad was about to happen. He parked the car, turned off the engine, and suddenly said that we were meant for each other. I didn't want to upset him, so I told him I was engaged and that we were just friends. He was known for being aggressive, and I was terrified. He started crying heavily and said he loved me. Then he wrapped his arm around my neck and began squeezing, pressing it hard against the right side. I was sitting there, staring straight ahead, when I suddenly lost consciousness. When I came to, I saw a police officer standing by the window. He asked if I was okay. I was scared and confused. There was vomit on my shirt, and I had urinated myself. He had squeezed my carotid artery so hard that I passed out. Back in high school, he had been a wrestler. He told the officer that everything was fine and that I was drunk. He was given a fine. I didn't tell the truth because I was afraid that if he were arrested, my future husband's family would blame me, or at least, that's what I believed at the time. I said I was fine, but that I wanted to go home. I thought that if I said that in front of the officer, he wouldn't dare do anything else because our names had been taken. He drove me home in silence. I don't know whether he intended to kill me or whether he was simply so angry that things got out of control. Either way, he almost did. That experience deeply affected me. I eventually told my husband, but not right away, because I felt partially responsible for having met with his cousin. I saw him a few times at family gatherings after that, and then he stopped showing up altogether. After what he did, he never dared to speak to me again. If it hadn't been for that police officer, I don't know if I would still be alive. This happened to me about 5 years ago, and even now I get chills whenever I think about it. I was renting a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy, affordable, and full of character. The only thing I didn't like was the basement beneath the house. The entrance was in the laundry room, a square wooden hatch that blended perfectly with the floor. It was locked from the outside, and I had no reason to open it. I assumed it just contained pipes, cobwebs, and the usual things. One evening, I came home late from work. It had been a stressful day, and all I wanted was to take a shower and fall into bed. As soon as I walked in, I noticed something strange. The light in the laundry room was on. I clearly remembered turning it off that morning, but I assumed I was just being forgetful and turned it off again. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind. But lying there, I realized the sound was coming from the laundry room, a soft, rhythmic tapping. My heart started racing. I hesitated. Should I get up and check, or just stay in bed and hope it stopped? Curiosity won out. I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight and quietly walked to the laundry room. When I opened the door, it was quiet. Then I noticed the basement hatch was slightly open. My stomach dropped. I clearly remembered that it had been locked. I couldn't understand how I could have opened it accidentally. Trying to stay calm, I convinced myself it was probably an animal that had gotten in. I firmly shut the hatch and placed a heavy box of laundry detergent on top of it before going back to bed. The next day, I called my landlord and asked if there had ever been issues with pests in the house. He was surprised and said no one had complained before, but he promised to send someone to check. That night, I checked the hatch twice and even placed a chair on top of it just in case. There were no sounds. I started to feel foolish for being so scared. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door slowly creaking open. I froze. My door doesn't creak unless someone pulls it slowly, and I was certain I had closed it before going to sleep. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, until I heard soft footsteps approaching my bed. My phone was on the nightstand, just out of reach. The footsteps stopped right beside my bed. I could feel a presence, and hear quiet breathing in the darkness. Summoning all my courage, I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it toward the intruder. A man was crouching on the floor. His face was pale. His eyes were wide and unblinking. He looked just as terrified as I was. I screamed and ran out of the room, pounding on my neighbor's door until they let me in and called the police. When the police arrived, they found the man inside my house, hiding in the basement. He had a small mattress, food wrappers, and a pile of random items he had likely taken from my home. The lock on the hatch had been broken. It appeared he had been living there for at least several days, possibly longer. The most horrifying part, the police told me they found a notebook containing detailed notes about me. He had written down my schedule, when I left for work, when I came home, even what I wore. There was also a list of plans, but they refused to tell me what was written there. I moved out the following week and stayed with friends until I found a new place. To this day, I don't know how he got into my house or how long he had been watching me before I realized something was wrong. Those are all the stories for today.